In the gilded halls of Versailles, where King Louis XVI once danced under crystal chandeliers while his treasury bled dry from the American War of Independence, a desperate assembly of revolutionaries hatched a dream on paper, a currency called the Assignat, backed not by gold or silver, but by the seized lands of the Church vast estates that made up nearly a tenth of France. It began innocently enough in 1789, when the first batch of 400 million livres in crisp, official notes rolled off the presses, each one stamped with a solemn promise. This note is redeemable for national property. The peasant clutched it and saw a future farm. The merchant saw flowing trade. The soldier saw his pay. Trust was born. The assignat was more than money. It was hope in ink, a revolution printed on rag paper. But empires, like men, grow fat on their own illusions. The wars did not stop. Austria marched. The royal family attempted flight. Internal revolts flared in the Vendée. The assembly needed more, always more. So the printing presses hummed through the night, not in hundreds of millions, but in billions. By 1791, 1.2 billion livres flooded the streets. By 1792, 2.5 billion. By 1793, 4.5 billion. And still the presses groaned. Each new issue looked identical to the last, same seal, same promise, same portrait of liberty, but each was worth less, for the land it claimed to represent was not being sold fast enough. The government itself became the biggest buyer, purchasing estates with assignats to resell them for assignats. It was a closed loop, a paper bubble inflating on hot air and desperation. The people felt the rot first in their pockets. In 1790, a loaf of bread cost 1 assignat. By 1794, it cost 100. By 1795, 500. Shopkeepers changed price tags thrice a day. A Parisian baker scrawled his rates on a slate at dawn. By noon, he erased them with a rag soaked in despair. Workers demanded wages hourly. Mothers sent children to market with wheelbarrows of notes for a sack of flour. Pensioners, those quiet souls who had saved for decades, watched their life's work vanish into smoke. One elderly widow in Lyon burned her stack of assignats in her hearth, not for warmth, but for vengeance. "Better to heat my bones," she spat, "than feed this lie." The government, drunk on its own ink, tried to command reality. In 1793, the Committee of Public Safety issued decrees. Maximum prices. Bread, 3 sous per pound. Wages, fixed. Death to hoarders. Death to speculators. Death to anyone who refused assignats at face value. But you cannot legislate value into worthless paper any more than you can command the sun to rise in the west. Black markets bloomed in alleys. Farmers hid grain. Butchers sold under counters. A chicken cost 1,000 assignats on the street and a single silver CCU in the shadows. The law became a joke, enforced by guillotines that severed heads but could not sever truth. Inflation became a living beast. It stalked the markets, devoured savings, and gnawed at the soul of the nation. A tailor in Marseille recorded in his ledger, January 1795, suit for 200 assignats. June 1795, same suit, 12,000 assignats. December 1795, client paid in chickens. Contracts dissolved. A landlord who rented a room for 50 livres a month in 1790 found himself receiving 50,000 assignats by 1796, enough to buy a candle. Debts vanished like morning mist. A debtor owed 10,000 livres, paid with a single hyperinflated note. Creditors hanged themselves from rafters. The middle-class doctors, lawyers, teachers were annihilated. Only 2 classes survived: those who owned land, gold, or foreign coin, and those who owned the presses. The terror fed on this chaos. Robespierre, that austere priest of the revolution, railed against hoarders and enemies of the people. But the real enemy was the assignat itself. It turned neighbor against neighbor. A baker accused of raising prices was dragged to the scaffold. A farmer hiding wheat was denounced by his own son for a reward in assignats trust. The invisible glue of society dissolved. Markets became battlegrounds. Barter returned. A pair of boots for a ham, a watch for a barrel of wine. The currency of a modern state regressed to the Bronze Age. By 1796, the assignat was a corpse. One note that had bought a house in 1790 now bought a matchstick. The Directory, the new government, finally admitted defeat. In February 1796, they staged a public execution not of a man but of the currency itself. In the Place Vendôme, workers fed millions of assignats into furnaces. The smoke rose like a funeral pyre over Paris. "Let the paper die," declared the decree, "so the nation may live." A new currency, the mandat territorial, was issued, also backed by land, also doomed. Within months, it too collapsed. France would not stabilize until Napoleon introduced the gold-backed franc in 1803. But the damage was done. The assignat had not just destroyed wealth, it had destroyed faith. In the cafes of Paris, survivors whispered, "We trust paper." The rich, those who had converted assignats to land, early emerged richer. The poor, those who had believed the promise, were left with ashes. The revolution, born to liberate, had devoured its children with a monster made of ink and lies. This was no accident, it was policy. The assignats were not a mistake. They were a choice. The Assembly chose to fund war and welfare by printing, not taxing. They chose to believe that value could be created by decree. They chose to ignore the Roman denarius, which had fallen from 95% silver under Augustus to a bronze slug under Gallienus. They chose to forget the German mark of 1923, the Zimbabwean dollar of 2008. They chose, as all governments do when cornered, to steal from the future by robbing the present. And the people paid, always the people, the widow burning her savings, the baker erasing his slate, the child carrying a wheelbarrow of wages for a loaf, the pensioner starving in a garret, the teacher trading chalk for bread. This is the true face of inflation, not a statistic, but a human tragedy. It is the slow strangulation of hope, the erosion of dignity, the collapse of the social contract. When money lies, everything lies. When money dies, order dies with it. Yet some survived. The farmer who hid his silver CCU under the floorboard. The widow who bought a small vineyard with her first assignats before the flood. The merchant who smuggled gold to Amsterdam. The artisan who bartered his skills for food. They understood a truth as old as Rome. Real wealth is not in promises but in production. Land that grows wheat, hands that build, mines that yield metal, businesses that create. These endure when paper burns. The assignat teaches us what Rome taught, what Weimar taught, what Zimbabwe taught. Currency is not just a tool. It is a covenant. Break it, and you break the nation. Print without limit, and you print your own death warrant. The presses may hum, the notes may multiply, the politicians may promise, but arithmetic is merciless. Value cannot be conjured. Trust cannot be commanded. And when the people finally see the trick, when the baker refuses the note, when the soldier demands gold, when the widow burns her savings, the game is over. France learned this in blood and fire. The guillotine claimed 17,000 heads, but the assignat claimed millions of lives through slow starvation and despair. It fueled the terror, radicalized the revolution, and paved the way for Napoleon's dictatorship. A currency crisis became a national catastrophe. And still, we forget. Today the world runs on the same temptation. Central banks print trillions. Governments borrow without end. Debts are restructured. Deficits are stimulus. Inflation is transitory. The notes look the same. The digits on screens look solid. But beneath the surface, the same debasement occurs, not in silver content, but in purchasing power. $1 in 1971 buys what $6 buy today. €1 in 2000 buys half what it did. The wheelbarrow may not yet be needed, but the erosion is real. The assignat whispers from history, it can happen here. Not with feudal kings or revolutionary assemblies, but with algorithms and balance sheets. Not with rag paper, but with digital entries. The mechanism is the same. Spend beyond means, print to cover, promise tomorrow will pay. The victims are the same. The saver, the worker, the pensioner. The winners are the same. Those who own assets. Those close to the spigot of money creation. So what must you do? First, see inflation for what it is, a tax. A silent, regressive, relentless tax that punishes the prudent and rewards the connected. Second, build wealth in what cannot be printed. Land that feeds, skills that produce, businesses that profit, commodities that endure. Third, never trust stability. The Romans laughed at the idea of a worthless denarius. The French toasted the assignat as salvation. The Germans in 1919 thought their mark eternal. All were wrong. History does not repeat, but it rhymes. The assignat was not the first currency to die. nor will it be the last. It was a chapter in a book written in every empire that forgot the iron law of money. You cannot cheat reality. Print, debase, inflate, and the people will pay in hunger, chaos, and blood. The presses may sing, but they sing a dirge. In the end, the Assignat was not defeated by armies or kings. It was defeated by a baker who refused a wheelbarrow of notes for a loaf, by a farmer who buried his silver, by a widow who chose fire over fraud. The people, in their quiet defiance, reclaimed truth. And truth, not paper, is the only foundation of a lasting economy. The smoke from the Place Vendôme has long dissipated. But the lesson lingers in the air, acrid and unmistakable. When money lies, nations fall. Guard your wealth. Guard your trust. And remember the Assignat, the paper promise that devoured a revolution and taught the world. Once again, that some dreams are printed on nothing but ash.